Hello everybody, well nice to see so many people. I'll just give you a run through. I'm Craig, one of the organisers here, Pearson, and the Agile Practitioners Group. So if you've seen the brief, tonight's talk we've got Helen from lastminute.com talking about continuous delivery. So that should take us about 30 minutes, and we'll have about 10 minutes Q&A. Then we'll have, if anyone fancies a quick break, just grab a drink, go to the bathroom, and we'll move on to the second talk with Andy from Sky, who's going to be talking about Agile transition. Okay, good. And then Pearson have kindly sponsored the event, and they've arranged some refreshments and drinks for us after. We can all have a chat and share some ideas and go from there. So I won't waste any more of your time. Hand you over to Helen.
So I'm Helen. I'm an iteration manager stroke project manager at lastminute.com. We have been doing some form of Agile or other for quite a few years now. But my team, which is the team that manages the mobile version of the website, has started doing continuous delivery over the last little over a year in order to better reap the benefits of Agile. So when you consider what Agile is, we should all probably be roughly familiar with the Agile Manifesto, or at least heard of it. It's based on numerous principles, the very first of which is this: our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. It's right in there, in the very first principle. So you have to ask yourself, if you're not doing continuous delivery, how agile are you really? So Jez Humble and David Foley wrote this lovely book on the topic. I highly recommend you read it if you can lift it. If not, get it on Kindle. And they have outlined 8 principles of continuous delivery. First one is that you're striving for a reliable and repeatable process. Software should be a science, not an art. So you don't want to produce something unique each time. You want to be able to follow the process and produce something consistent each and every time. That requires automation. Any process that's manual is going to be error prone, so you want to automate as much as possible so that you know every time you turn the crank, the same thing is going to come out. You should use version control. I'm sure we already do, at least for code, but it's about more than just that. Everything should be in version control, not just the code, but the configuration, the properties, every single thing should be in version control. That way, a build is not just a version of the code, it's a whole change set that goes together. You want to bring the pain forward. Deployment is complex, software is complex. You've got to set up your environment. You've got to install the right version of the code, you've got to configure everything. And in so doing, you incur a lot of risk. The more often that you do these processes, the less painful they're going to be. It's like going to the dentist. The less often you go, the more painful it's probably going to be. So you want to do it more often, bring the pain forward, reduce the risk. And you build quality in. Instead of waiting until the end to do heaps of regression, you practice quality from the very start. Reduce the number of defects early on, catch them early on, and fix them as soon as they're introduced, even before they're checked in if possible. And that way, hopefully, no one's added more on top of it. Hopefully, the developer still has the context that he or she was in when the defect was introduced, and that makes it a lot cheaper to fix. And just like a pie, software can't be 80% done. It's either ready for release or it's not. You can kind of guess, maybe there's 20% left to do. We all know how often these guesses are accurate, right? It's either done or it's not. There's no done. It's actually done when it's ready to provide value to the customer. Everyone on the team should share responsibility. It's a group effort. Creating software, we shouldn't just be throwing things over the wall. We should all be working together and having interactions with one another rather than relying on processes. People can lose context as well in sharing things over the wall, and that way, if we have more interactions as a team, knowledge is shared, and we can all share responsibility for the planet. Finally, the eighth principle: continuous improvement. Every team is going to change over time. Even if your team is perfect, you're still going to need to evolve your processes over time. So don't view your processes as static. Hold regular retrospectives, reevaluate what's going on, learn from what you've already done, and continue to improve. So what does all this actually mean? Again, returning to the highest priority of Agile, we want to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Satisfy the customer. That means build, measure, learn. First, we create ideas, we build them out into a product that we can release into production, and that allows us to measure the feedback from customers and learn better what our customers want. And the more often we can build and release into production and get the customer's feedback, the shorter this feedback loop becomes, and the quicker we can get to our highest priority, satisfying the customer. So when I first joined lastminute.com, our processes were a lot more time consuming. We released about 3 times a year. We were aiming for once a quarter, but somehow the fourth release would just fall off the calendar at the end of the year because of all the delays that would happen. Deployments would be spread out over several nights, not days, nights, and they had to be supported by tech ops, development, QA, sometimes DBAs as well. There were all these mountains of paperwork that we had to go through just to assess the risk involved in integrating all of these pieces together in the QA environment, which of course was happening for the first time after months of development. So it was a complete nightmare. There was no room for making emergency changes. An emergency change could take weeks. Definitely no opportunity to experiment, to make quick changes, and to learn quickly from customers. So over time, we started looking for ways to streamline the process. After a while, we were able to start releasing once a month, then every 3 weeks, and then every week. In my team, the mobile team, we release at least once a week. This is the structure of my team. We have a bunch of devs, a couple of QAs, a BA/TA, myself, and we also work closely with an analyst who analyzes the data in Google Analytics based on real customers. We work closely as well with product owners and with user experience designers. We use processes like pair programming, and this helps reduce the number of defects. Like I said before, build quality in, and it also helps share the knowledge on the team. We use a bit of a hybrid between Scrum and Kanban. So while we follow a lot of the ceremonies of Scrum, we have iteration planning meetings, and we have stand-up meetings, and we report based on sprints. We actually follow the Kanban process for getting work done. So for example, something comes in that's a business priority, it's right at the top of the board, so we know that's going to be picked up next by the next pair that's free. And of course each day we try to rotate pairs so that knowledge is shared, and one person stays put from each pair so that that context remains. Once that bit of work is now complete, moves over to the complete column, gets checked in, automated tests are run against it, and that So it's not only to verify the functionality of the change, but also as a regression. Then it's picked up by QA for manual validation. So that means trying it out on mobile devices. We are a mobile team, and things are a bit different on individual mobile devices. So manual validation is still quite important. Finally, it moves into the showcase column, where it's showcased back to the business who initially raised the request. Once things have been showcased, they can be released. It doesn't have to be at the end of a sprint. In fact, we might release just one item. If it's been showcased, it's ready to go, it's a priority. That way, our release isn't dependent on operational constraints or the ceremonies of Scrum. It's dependent on business needs. So here's an example of something that we did a few months ago as an experiment. This is our mobile website. We've got a link to each of our offerings. The first two are mobile optimized shopping paths, hotels and flights. But for the rest, we haven't yet built out mobile optimized paths. So we link users back to the desktop site. The restaurants link takes people to the restaurant search page on the desktop site. It's not the best user experience, but it's better than not having a link at all. So our product team thought, well, data show that most of the restaurant bookings on our site are actually for London restaurants. So why not, instead of taking people to the search page, why not take them directly to search results for London and see how customers react to that? So we went through the process and we got this launched. It only took about a day because it was a quick change and we relied on our automation testing to get everything regressed.
So what frequency of performance testing, security testing do you do if you've got weekly releases that potentially would have picked up on that?
We do some automated performance testing, but because that was a link from the mobile site to the desktop site, we're not really in the habit of testing the performance of the desktop site. So I think that's why it was missed.
Yeah. Was the end validation that Microsoft put out, was that being done on site, or was it locally out?
Everything's on site. We're all co-located, so that makes it a lot easier. So just to wrap up. Continuous delivery lets you fail fast, lets you make those mistakes quickly, and that way you can get back to shortening the feedback loop, satisfying the customer as quickly as possible. And from the team's perspective, it automates all the grungy stuff and lets valuable human resources spend time on what they're actually good at. Are there any other questions? Since there already been some.
I think it relies on different projects, different platforms, because it could annoy the users. You know, continually changing stuff on a daily or bi-weekly basis. You know, what they get used to, your website, your features, you could then change. And in your case, you did, and then you went back again. So it has benefits in some circumstances, but not always.
This is true. However, the idea of doing things like continuous delivery is that rather than making big bang changes, you make small incremental changes. So while things are continually changing, it's not going to be 1 minute the site's pink and the next minute it's blue. It's going to be small things at a time.
Isn't it also the case that things when you have to deliver means that the ability to you and want?
Exactly.
You don't have to change all the time, it's just when you want to, you can do it fast.
Exactly, and the change may not even be visible to the user. It could be a refactor or something else that's improving the site but not completely changing the experience.
Do you have a group of if there's a change that you are concerned might not be received particularly well, do you have a smaller group, user base, or some kind of customers that you can test with, or do you actually these days just pretty much push things out?
We do lab testing as well. It can be a bit challenging because you get people in the coffee shop or in the lab in the office, and they're not necessarily in the mindset they would be in when they're actually booking a holiday. So it's not always the same.
Yeah. I was going to say, we've seen David Snowden talking about this with his company Veg. So he's looking at some really good stuff whereby you're actually enlist the help of your customers to give feedback all the time using typically a mobile device, so really perfect for you. So you can say, hey, how was my experience? uses triads as well, then a sliding scale. And what he then does is combine that with looking at your technical opportunities from your team, seeing where it overlaps, because if you've got a user need or a user dissatisfaction mixing with technical opportunity in the same place, that's probably the thing you should work on next. So I know when you've got the technology for delivering software, I'm not sure where you, as a community, are very good at thinking about it, the complexity end of the point of deciding what to do. So I'm not sure it's a finished product yet. It's something you might want to look at.
Sounds interesting. Thanks for
So
that.
fit in your space very nice. So cognitive edge, it's not kind of connected.
Yeah, it's just interesting how many versions of the code you have at one time. 'Cause are you like continuously delivering, but also working on maybe something that's a bit bigger that you're holding back, and you're sort of here's something else that we might bring out a bit later on, but we'll continuously deliver smaller features along the way, like a version upgrade or everything like that.
Yeah, sometimes bigger epics come along that just have to be released in a bit more of a chunk.
Yeah.
And we use feature flags for that.
Right.
So everything still gets checked into trunk. We don't do branching. But we'll use a feature flag to sort of hide certain things until they're just built out enough that it can be released and it can be used by customers.
But just features. I mean, you don't have to sort of say, right, we're going to think about this as we're going to continuously improve the user experience that we've got now, but down the line we're going to do something that's going to be quite a big change, and so I might hold back a whole release for that. It's just on a feature by feature basis.
No, we still wouldn't pull back a release because we're working on a big chunk of work. We'll just hide it behind a feature flag until it's ready to go, and we'll continue releasing little bits as we go.
If you want to see this taken to its conclusion, if you look at the talk Ken Paxton did a while about Amazon, they're releasing 1,500 times a day. So if they can manage, and they say if they ever have to do another merge, they would never release software again. There's too much going on at any one time. It's kind of staggering when you think about it.
Feature flags, are you sort of going later on, going back and sort of removing those?
Yes.
So sort of the story will be done, but then the removing of there's a downstream associated story that you're going to do when you're happy with it. So.
Yeah, periodically we'll go back and we'll assess which feature flags aren't needed anymore because they've been true for a while. And we've shaken out all the bugs and it seems like everything's working out well, so we go ahead and move to them.
How often are releasing now compared to what you were doing?
It's at least once a week. I would say roughly once a week on average. So some weeks we'll release twice, even 3 times. Occasionally we'll miss one, like if there's a code freeze on, something like that.
And is your aim to increase that cadence?
As needed.
So you think you've reached the maximum you want to, or that you can't, that there's too much going on in the system for you to gain further?
We could release every day, technically. There isn't a huge business need for it at the moment, so that's probably why we don't release more often. We could even release several times a day, to be honest. It's not a physical constraint, it's just a matter of business needs.
Can I just ask, how's the actual business side of your business taking this? I assume they're delighted, otherwise you wouldn't still be doing it, but have you seen a change in the way they're asking you to do things?
Yeah, I think they're a lot more interactive than they would have been under the old way of doing things. Back in the day, it would have been sort of writing lengthy requirements documents and having very formal meetings, and now it's sort of stopping by, writing things on index cards and having quick discussions in order to get things done.
So are you seeing the size of the things they ask you to do decrease?
Yes, definitely.
But why do you go through this? I mean, is it when the business person signs it off, does that automatically release it? Is it operations or QA person pushes one button? How is the feature actually released? Is it automatic? What is the gateway?
So there's really just one gateway. As I mentioned in our Kanban process, there is a showcase, and that's sort of the business signing off. So once that's happened, anything that's in that column can be released.
And that's pushing one big green button, isn't it?
We do have a big green button, but we sort of let release management know, and just for security purposes, tech ops team actually pushes.
How long does that take from pushing a button? How long until anything's live? Is it seconds? Is it minutes?
Minutes. Under 5 minutes.
In your business, you learn what is the most important ways for you to measure? You get the most important feedback.
It depends on what it is that we're trying to learn. You create a hypothesis, and then what you want to do is test that hypothesis out. So what you measure will be whatever is going to be best at testing a hypothesis. It might be traffic, it might be conversion. It'll vary depending on what the
But a lot of it
hypothesis
is metrics you actually gather from the traffic on these apps. Less surveys, focus groups.
Yeah, less surveys and focus groups. We do things like that, but I think you get the most honest data when you're measuring people behaving as they would normally, not reporting something in a survey or acting in a lab.
This is a big question. So to get from where you were to where you are now, what were the biggest challenges do you think that you had to deal with, that you had to overcome?
I think the biggest challenge is always cultural, because it's not really about tools or about systems. It's about people and how people interact and how people work. So you have to really get people on board and get people understanding why the processes are the way they are and why we should all be working that way. And once you've got that, then it's easy.
How long did you take to put the site live the very first time? From conception to launch?
I was actually on a different team then, so I can't tell you exactly. I think it might have been 2 or 3 months. I'm not sure.
And since then, have you been involved in launching something really new? I mean, we understand it's a lot easier to relate when you're talking small features, incremental improvements, but something that's brand new that hasn't been done before, and then you're launching that.
Yes.
What's the cycle time that takes you from conception to launch?
Something big. So, like for instance, first we launched the hotel shopping path, and then the flight shopping path after. So the flight shopping path probably took a couple of months in total. But what we did was we still made that incremental. So first we launched a search page, and then once you typed in your search criteria, it took you to the desktop site with your results. And then we launched the results page, and so on and so forth, until the whole path was built out. So even though it takes a while, it can still be broken down into smaller chunks.
You've talked about measure a few times. Sorry.
That's okay, you do.
Going from the Kanban side, what are you measuring about your process?
That's a good question. So in terms of